Hi, my name is Ben Christensen. I identify as a human. Would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is Igor Jablokov. I'm founder and CEO of an AI company known as Pryon, spelled Pryon as in Nancy.
We've been in different places together.
Hmm.
Where are you now in contrast to then?
Yeah, so I mean, the last time you and I interacted, it was pre-pandemic. That's why it feels so long ago, because a lot of us were obviously grounded through that, horrible experience that affected so many lives. Um, so yeah, we attended an SAP Sapphire event together. That was a lot of fun. I think when SAP first opened their Manhattan, headquarters, we were early, um, spending some time there, basically at the genesis of this company. So I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina, which most not be familiar, but this is where Apple's going to put their new AI headquarters. There's some great research universities here between NC State, NC Central, UNC, and Duke University that are based here. There's some great companies that are here outside of Apple. There's a big presence by MetLife. There's a big presence obviously by Red Hat and SAS and Cisco and these style of companies as well. I think people will be surprised to know that Google Cloud has a major presence here as well. So it was a great environment for us to gestate this idea, and the idea was this: augmented intelligence. We knew that interactive experiences of the style that you're used to at home, whether you've interacted with Alexa, whether you interact with Siri, Google Assistant, and the likes, we're going to be coming to our workplace, but not in the way that people expect. And so that's how we first crossed paths, because obviously SAP is a major participant in enterprise ecosystems, and but we all have this shared common bond that we're trying to create natural experiences, approachable human scale experiences as well, and that's how we first got acquainted.
Human scale approachable experiences. Um, I really appreciate the articulation with which you approach these human scale augmented by intelligences beyond human intelligence, yet informed by human intelligence. It almost seems like at the beginning of poetry, if it wasn't so critically serious in its effect on business and the world and implications for society. Um, how do you've given a bit of a background and an overview. How do you frame the intended or anticipated or targeted impact of what you are creating?
Yeah, so think this way, right? AI practitioners as a whole, we're creating these tools. But we have a sense of responsibility when we make these tools, and not everybody, really thinks about that as they're going through their creation process. For me, it's not unlike creating a hammer, and you put this in, President Jimmy Carter's hand, and he'll build you Habitat for Humanity out of this hammer. But if you give it to a serial killer like Ted Bundy, unfortunately, he's going to be harming a lot of folks with this very same hammer. So fundamentally, you can say Prime is built on similar technologies that you would witness, from some providers, but the implementation of them is different in order to safeguard intellectual property, safeguard people, safeguard decisions, have private and secure incarnations. So before we talk about the modern day experience, we have to go back in time, right? For all the folks that may not be aware of us. So I started my career as a research engineer at IBM Microelectronics, and halfway through that, I was leading an advanced AI team. We were discovering early baby versions of what you now know as Watson. Well, IBM didn't want to greenlight it; it was just too early, and so I departed and I founded a venture-backed startup that a year later showed up at the first TechCrunch Disrupt conference, and I flipped open a flip phone and spoke into it and held it out outstretched in my hand, and nobody knew what I was talking about. It was one of the world's first AI assistants. What people didn't know is that I was secretly working with Apple in 2007 on Siri before it was Siri. It was based on the iPod OS. So I couldn't publicly talk about it. Half a decade later, people realized we were the first AI cloud company, that we had numerous enterprise and carrier customers. Sprint was a client, Microsoft was a client as example. People were using us for search, they were using us for messaging, they were using us for call mining, converting your voicemails to text. And when we started raising our next round, that's when Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Nuance, and others jumped tracks and they went after us on M&A. And we ended up becoming Amazon's first AI-related acquisition, what ended up birthing what many people know as Alexa. So that's the provenance of these things. And so in 2017, when we started this venture, so over half a decade ago, we knew that that style experience would come to the workplace, but not the way that people expect. Because your workplaces are very serious environments. People put a lot of trust in your respective brands. And so it's going to require, market-leading accuracy, scale, security, and speed in order to move and grow with your businesses.
Not how I expect, not how we expect it will affect workplaces. Accuracy and speed and scale. I love the way that you describe how it affects how we will approach the market. Because right now, because you use the word expect, though we're in the 4th month of this good year of 2023, when we have seen the fastest adoption of a technology ever, if I'm not mistaken, being ChatGPT. Yeah, I'm bringing that in here because when it comes to expectations, there is more buzz than I can humanly digest and collect sensibly. Funny to say, because I have to put humanly collect. I would actually use or reach for an AI to help me make sense of the explosive, that is to say, Cambrian explosive rise of AI adoption in all aspects of society, not just business this year. So I would love to ask you to go deeper or put your expert perspective on those expectations based on this type of a view in our 4th month of this year.
Yeah, so with respect to OpenAI, ChatGPT, I wouldn't use the word adoption. I would use the word exploration. And here's why. Adoption assumes that you're going to be interacting with it in the long term and that it's essentially sticky. I think I would compare and contrast. What's similar between ChatGPT and Pryon is the fact that we knew that a natural language interface is the correct one, because we start speaking before we ever start, reading and writing and things of that sort. So that's important. Now, we're inherently more multimodal. You can talk to us, not just type into us as well, but that's, going further into the weeds. Where we're dissimilar is their approach was to essentially consume all the open source knowledge that was available, whereas we only consume the knowledge that an enterprise wants to ingest into the Pryon platform, so they can control that. So that way you don't have toxic content, you don't have sexist, racist content in there. Whereas in their approach, it's a model from a couple years ago. Ours, an enterprise can update it in 1 second, right? So to move, at the speed of their business. And when I say accuracy, right, you'll ask a question there, you'll ask a question here, and something will come out. Ours wouldn't hallucinate. It'll trigger an out of domain if it can't answer. But you know what people are trusting to put inside Prime? Things related to nuclear reactors. That level of heavy technical documentation is getting ingested into this system. things related to semiconductors, things related to pharmaceutical plants, paper plants, things that will run governments. That's the IP, the crown jewels that are getting ingested into Pryon's platform. And so when you talk about accuracy, we're talking about the accuracy, to reduce the distance between knowledge and essential workers that are doing very important things in our ecosystems, in our communities as well. That's a totally different ball of wax.
Wow. I'm understanding this opportunity now. And when I'm looking at exploration and adoption, thanks for making the differentiation between adoption and exploration. Because when you explain this scenario of, in a second, being able to have an intelligence for my enterprise make sense and bring that gap between the knowledge and the knowledge workers in the company um, united, I think, where can I use this right now? What does it take for me to get this? It's probably jumping the gun a little bit, but it just seems, wow, if that's available, what do I need to do to get involved?
Yeah, and I'll give you some literal examples. So Georgia Pacific, has had this operating in their plants for many years now. And what they've done is ingested a body of knowledge relating to safety and security, and the high caliber, high accuracy responses that they get. Their engineers and technicians and their supervisors used to stall out for hours, looking for knowledge in order to move workflows. Now they get answers in 1 second. And they don't have to replace their systems of record. They don't have to replace how they were authoring content. So they had content in SharePoint, they had content in Exchange, but they ingested it into the Prime platform, which took them no time at all. And now they're able to get high quality answers, at point of need. And that's that's the transformation that's happening to their business. In the case of other clients that will be announced in the energy space, as an example, they're predicting that they can half the downtime of a power plant, by rapidly giving engineers and technicians critical documentation that they need. And we don't realize how much time is wasted, stumbling and bumbling throughout the organization, because when we can't find something, what do we end up doing? We pick up the phone and we try to find a subject matter expert in order to tap into their tribal knowledge. There's no easy way to actually get to that knowledge programmatically. And so, Ben, the big challenge that Pryon solves is, imagine all of the content that you have in your respective enterprises being an ocean. And what human scale means is, how do we transform this ocean into a faucet that you press a button on and you get a single cup of water out of it? Now, it's a clean cup of water, whereas the ocean is the ocean. And so that meant that there had to be automation, for plumbing, to make sure that it doesn't get contaminated, to make sure that it's filtered correctly, and to make sure that it comes at a water pressure that can drop that perfect glass of water to you in your homes and businesses. That is the challenge that we set out to solve many years ago.
We're talking about quality. When we're talking about a clean cup of water, it's
Right.
quality, it's secure to the user, I assume, and you're accessing it via natural language as well. This has got to have gone through many iterations, which I know that you've been working on through the years. And so it's heartening to see the types of queries and scenarios already in industry, how this is being utilized. We touched briefly on security. Whenever we talk about enterprise, we think security and access, because this is applicable to all industries, and it's accessing that knowledge. So you got me thinking on a lot of things, and I have to pick apart exactly what question next, because it's a mindset that we're prompted for in the practical quarter to quarter industry, but we're not fully I believe I'm using the royal we here. Now tell me what you found. Not fully able to grasp what that would feel like, look like in its mature uh, application throughout the enterprise. Does everybody have use to this, or is it for specific users? It probably starts somewhere at the C-suite, right? Or is it the field, or all of the above?
Yeah, Ben, your intuition is going in the right direction. It literally is everybody. Everybody, everybody in a given organization, because um, who has access to SharePoint as an example, who has access to ServiceNow, who has access to Confluence, who has access to legacy, content management systems. All of us require knowledge in order to perform our jobs and roles, no matter where we are. If we're in the mailroom, if we're in the C-suite, and everything in between, we require policies, procedures, regulatory materials, HR documentation, help desk content, support content, sales enablement content, technical documentation, biographies of our experts in terms of who knows what, analysts reports, financial instruments, contracts. There's unstructured knowledge trapped all over the organization. And we don't realize how many hours a day we actually lose finding the right thing so that we can emit the perfect answer to a customer, to a partner, to another staff member in our organization. So that's what it means. And security means what? It means that you'll have access to a Pryon portal, that you'll only be able to log in with your single sign-on credentials. And the AI only learns from a read-only connection to any repositories that you trust, and you want it to transform existing static content, such as Word files, PowerPoints, PDFs, web pages, into an interactive experience. Now, once you create this knowledge fabric, it creates all sorts of knowledge freedom in your organization, because now you've transformed what used to be static documentation into something that you can connect into your IVRs to answer phone calls. You can have it automatically answering emails. You can have it answering questions for folks that are sitting in front of Teams or Slack. You may want it to power a chatbot on your website, or an assistant in a mobile app. So I'll give you a perfect example. A financial services entity has to cook a fee schedule as a PDF document. So they have this PDF document in a repository. Now that can be transformed into an interactive experience, so that anywhere your clients ask for, hey, what's the bounce check fee for student banking, they get an answer. And if you need to update your fee schedule, all you have to do is drag and drop a new PDF file into Pryon, and a second later, every channel where you're interacting with your clients gets updated. That becomes a superpower, right? In terms of knowledge acquisition, and in terms of ensuring that you have a nimble organization that's always making decisions with the best intelligence possible.
That's an organization I would like to, or consider I'd be a part of anyway, making the best decisions possible. And of course, we strive for that. My mind races on, as you're giving these examples, and I'd love to hear a few more, on the different lines of business inside of a company. HR. Over the last 3 years, we saw, I mean, it's important all the time, but we've seen an uptick in the burning fire of diversity and inclusion, and how that becomes both an employee increased employee-owned force opportunity, but strategic rise in value for a company. It's always been important. This has been increasingly there. And when we think of AIs and bias and hiring and promoting processes, this is a tough one. I like to ask what could go wrong, which again is an errand in which if you ask that in any situation, you'll find things that could go wrong. But I want to, in a way that's productive, see how that could, for example, play out. I'm trying to look at the potentials for biases that exist within an organization, albeit much better than the open internet, to be magnified in the wrong way. Because this could go both. It's so potent. It's a force. It's a force for innovation, uh, operational efficiency. Clearly, just elevating the way that we work together when we literally have the best of intelligence um, at the touch of a natural language. I was about to say at the tap of a finger, but that's the old world's paradigm in this case. Um, could you reflect on that, uh, those issues of potential bias and how you've managed to approach those or grappled with them if you still are?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't call it HR, I call it talent, because if you think for the majority of the enterprises that are listening to this, one of your largest line items is taking care of the humans that actually drive your workflows. That's it. You know, unless you're in heavy industries, you know, you have a major expense item there. And so why wouldn't you want them to be as digital fluid as possible? Why would you not want them to be augmented? Because your job, if you're $1 trillion company, is to become a $10 trillion company. If you're $100 billion company, you're trying to become, you know, $1 trillion company. If you're $10 billion company, you're trying to go an order of magnitude in productivity as well. To your point about how you safeguard your staff and make sure that they're getting high quality, non-toxic content that doesn't have, you know, racist and sexist overtones and things of that sort, is to essentially build an interactive experience where you control the content that's flowing into it. And so with Pryon, you control what open sources you trust, you control what commercial data sources you trust, and you control what proprietary knowledge you're ingesting in there as well. You're not at the whims of essentially an external party that may be, you know, ingesting things from social media, you know, from Reddit, from Twitter, and such places as well. It's purpose built to your specifications that you want everybody in your organization to know, you know, your sales enablement content and the offerings from your partners and what these things cost and how bugs get reported and all of these style of things. You essentially focus the platform in on that content, and it essentially mimics that content.
That's a striking difference in input control or reflection of the. That's quite helpful. But with the benefits of, I see what you're saying. It's with the benefits of that power of the intelligence across. It's not a Wild West scenario. It's appropriately an enterprise intelligence scenario. Wow.
And not only
Okay.
that, I mean, when it emits an answer, you don't even have to trust the AI. So we don't subsume human beings and take credit for their work. So when an answer card shows up in the Pryon user experience, and by the way, you know, it's a very approachable user experience. If you saw it on our website at pryon.com, it would look like an Apple-like product. And why? Because our user experience designers came from Apple. So no surprise there. So we wanted to blend the best of enterprise style technology with the best of the consumer experiences that you already know and love, and you don't need any training in order to use the system. But when an answer card is revealed to you, you don't have to trust the AI. You can click on the answer card and it actually opens up the exact page where it learned it and it highlights exactly where it learned that fact. And so
Wow.
that way, you don't trust the AI, you trust the subject matter expert that originated and authored that work in the past, whether it's field service notes, whether it's a catalog, whether it's a contract, a financial instrument, some piece of documentation. You always know where it came from, and we always show it to you. By the way, we're not even talking about modern content. You know, there's crown jewel assets potentially from dozens of years ago or potentially decades ago. So when we talked about these power plants, you know, that we're helping service, they're getting answers from documents from the 1950s. Why? because when this AI consumes this knowledge that you pointed to, it doesn't matter if it's handwritten or needs to be OCR'd. That just magically happens.
You're connecting humans to humans. Um,
Correct.
this is a fundamental principle because often technology we see, I go back to these the conflicts of socio-technical studies and computer-supported collaborative work. And the essence is the better we're able to actually connect humans to humans, that is, and show if this was school, it's showing your work. This AI shows the work. The answer cards are showing the work. You can see where it was. It just helps you get there better, faster in a way that this system was able to do. That's valuable. That's significant. When I'm looking at this, I think RFP assistant and deep search and researcher analysis and knowledge gap analysis and graphing. I'm looking at now now that the enterprise has this AI, I connect to so many other companies through partnerships, through my supply chain. To what extent and what's the outlook of connecting these different enterprises together if they're running this system as well in that type of a scenario? Is should they connect? Should they talk to each other the same way that we try to have systems do that anyway, but just without this level of intelligence? And how
Ben,
would that look?
yeah, Ben, you're going in the right direction there. See, one of the issues that we're going to all face by the end of this decade is that the web as we know it is dead. It's going to become a hall of mirrors because the majority of what we consider as open source knowledge out there today, that we do our Google searches and we find what documents, we find images, we find videos. These are all human human created works, human authored works, right? They represent what was in our mind's eye as production. By the end of the decade, the vast majority of the content is going to be AI generated text, images, and videos. That means it's going to become a hall of mirrors. You're not even going to be able to have AIs trained on open source knowledge anymore because it's going to create cancers in them. Because it's no longer human originated language, right? And videos and audio. So now let me connect the dots to what you just said about how you create a knowledge fabric amongst your partner ecosystem is this.
Yes.
You're going to have to retreat to safety. And that means creating a digital library of content that you trust and create firewalls to those crown jewels and that intellectual property. And what you'll end up doing is creating a federation of trusted knowledge in your ecosystem and your supply chain so that UPS can send something to Delta Airlines, can send something, to, some other provider that can send something, to Cisco, that can send something to IBM, that can send something to Microsoft. So it'll be a different type of deep web in some way, where these knowledge fabrics will be interacting with one another because you don't want to know the world's knowledge now because they'll be contaminated. You want to know what Georgia Pacific's knowledge is on an issue, or the World Economics Forum knowledge is, or Westinghouse's knowledge is on a particular issue, or NVIDIA's knowledge is on a particular issue.
Right. And if you can interact as naturally as a human would interact with another, well, this is where I'm seeing this, because you talked about the networks and this federated trust of knowledge. I had a couple questions. What is truth? What is trust? And this is very important because there's a federation of trusted knowledge that is truth that becomes trusted, perhaps better because of this. And throughout the business networks, I want to ask, and I'm going to conjure up that metaphor of an individual human as if they're a business, where
Mhm.
all all of my limbs, all of a person's limbs, their toes, their fingers, their eyes, their brain, the internal organs, the systems must communicate as if it's a perfect running enterprise or a pretty good running enterprise, right? Electrical signals firing, there's a central, I can think a thought in natural internal language, and my mind can bring to mind and has sensors throughout the whole system, right? So I see that and I'm thinking, is this bringing our enterprises to that level of as if you're functioning like a human? I know it's a metaphor and I'm trying to understand, because if that's the case, I'm asking two questions in one. I'm trying to envision, you brought up the World Economic Forum, you brought up how we're talking to different companies in a supply chain with partners. Are enterprises going to be interacting with each other? Are we going to be interacting as humans with each other at that type of speed and sophistication that we enjoy as an internal business, as it were? A lot to take in there. I apologize.
Yeah, and a small correction that I would make is that you do not think in natural language.
Okay.
You are a quantum computer, right? So you're a lot more sophisticated than that. You're not a database. Salesforce and SAP and ServiceNow as structured information repositories do not exist in your head. And yet the minute that I ask you a question, hey, do you have an NDA signed with Acme Corp? Instantaneously, the answer appeared in your head, but there was no database, right?
Right.
Right. So it's a quantum computer. I mean, it's neurons, right? Synapses and things of that sort that are operating in your mind. And so while it's hard for you to inspect what's going to happen to this content, application content, documents, structured, unstructured, semi-structured content are going to be turned into a neural representation of that knowledge, right? Via this network, it's not even describable to humans, right? Because in the past, when we were constructing speech recognition systems, those were some of the first generative systems because they converted audio into text. And the way that the text was generated is they would take the audio and bind it, into the quanta of phonemes, and then they would do trigrams to take these three phonemes together and see what word could it be, and it developed an n-best list of what it could be. The way that transformer-based technologies and their ilk work, right? These neural networks, it's not human describable anymore. They're creating these abstract tokens in the same way that you have these abstractions in your head. Think about the bandwidth. Some people say, hey, these films have to be 24 frames per second in order to appear like they're moving, to our eyes. But our eyes have infinite bandwidth, right? And they have infinite frames per second. And they're constantly taking it in and recording it in our minds. And they're quickly throwing away and filtering the stuff that's not useful. And because we used to be prey animals, we can actually see high resolution in the center, lower resolution on the peripheral, but we have higher ability to sense motion in the periphery as well. And so when we think about these digital platforms in terms of what they represent, is they are trying to mimic our learning processes. So how do I take audio, video, images, document sources, and things of that sort, and create essentially a fabric representation of it that is then self-organizing the minute that you say something or type something in natural language. And then I transform that in terms of mathematical distance measures and things of that sort into something that you can understand and hear. All right, it's fascinating, but I'll actually counter myself and actually say something very simple. What does trusting something mean? It means you trust the underlying content that I was trained on. You trust that the only people that are able to update that, should. You trust that only the right people are able to get answers from that. And this is the thing that most people miss. unlike the hallucinations of these consumer-based AIs, Pryon actually says, I don't know,
Hmm.
if it doesn't know the answer to that. Now that's very important, because now what you can do when an AI says, I don't know, is it can help you to find the person in your organization, outside of your organization, that does know, so you can capture that tribal knowledge, and then it learns based on observing that interaction between, exactly as you said, Ben, a human interacting with another human. Now, all it did is it's able to take and absorb a lot of the transactions that subject matter expert would normally get, that already exist in document sources, to reduce their load, their cognitive load, right? And so that way, the things that get brought to them are the more challenging problems, the things that are going to be moving the world forward. And that's what's really, really exciting about that. Try to wrap your mind around this. No matter how much people say that the web is vast and it's growing, by exabytes per day, or God knows what the actual number is, it still represents less than 5% of the knowledge that actually drives our respected organizations. So the stuff that's authored and recorded represents less than 5% of what actually drives our organizations. The other 95% is trapped in human minds, right? So how do we get to that? Well, we need to create natural experiences and approachable experiences and humans scale experiences, because otherwise it's just too much.
When you use the 5%, and thank you, because this has been a fascinating hour and discussion. Um, when you use that 5%, there's that saying on how do you unlock the full percentages of your capabilities. Um, and you mentioned how we how we were as humans in ages past, and our evolution. And when you talk about this, you didn't use the word evolution, but I think of it as an, is it fair to say, an evolution of how people work together in the productive settings we call enterprises?
Yeah, and it's surprising how much waste there is, right? And that's going to be what's going to end up getting solved in the second half of this decade. The enterprises that unlock that knowledge freedom are going to be the ones that survive and thrive into the next decade, because it's making everybody highly effective. And I'll give you a perfect example. One of our former executives is a senior practitioner at Gartner. And he actually says, look, the majority of the questions that I get from the CEOs that I deal with are redundant. 8 out of 10 questions that I get, as a consultant here, as an analyst here, already exist in our written works, and yet they haven't been transformed into interactive works, to make it simple for people to use. We had one client that where their chatbot was completing less than 30% of transactions, and the majority of the transactions were actually going to human agents. Hilariously, all the AI did is it read their website of knowledge base articles and helped guide them to the knowledge that was missing, on their website. Is again, now over 90% of transactions are automatically being answered. And the ones that are getting through, the agents are even using the new chatbot in order to do that. And they hid the dial the agent button from their website. And so hilariously, even though all the content, the majority of the content already existed on their website in order to service their customers, it was such a poor experience, right? People don't think as search engines, as indexers and things of that sort. They'll type in 1 or 2 keywords, not get an answer, and they'll immediately pick up the phone and call you. And all of your listeners know how expensive every single one of those phone calls are, and the frustration that it adds, to servicing our clients and showing them that we can be very nimble. And yet the content's already there. But this is the equivalent of think of it, a couple hundred years ago, right? What we were doing to energize our economies. Unfortunately, we were killing whales, right? These poor creatures that are beautiful and vast and brilliant in their own way. That's how we were doing it, and yet we had trapped what energy in the ground in the form of oil, in the form of gas. And it wasn't until we had, a certain level of technology to be able to drill and refine that to use this alternate resources. This is a little bit of a thought experiment to show you that there was a point in time that the oil and gas industry was the more ecological choice. And now we have to see the oil and gas industry as a bootloader into the next ecological choice, which is renewable technologies and their ilk. So it's just a frame of reference. You have in your organizations already beautiful IP and assets that are just waiting to be transformed and put in front of an intern, a subject matter expert, a scientist, an engineer, a salesperson, right? Somebody in the C-suite, somebody in the mailroom that could change the course of your history as well. And yet it's trapped in a non-consumable way. That's what augmented intelligence is about, transforming, some of the ideas that are already there and making them human scale, making them consumable. And I kid you not only will you finally transform yourselves to be interactive experiences, you will have that order of magnitude, sea change in the same way that when SAP showed up, SAP was not selling to entry-level program managers and things of that sort. Very shrewdly, they walked into boardrooms and they looked at the KPIs that these organizations were measured in, and they pointed to the exact numbers that they could change in order to make them more productive, safer, more resilient organizations in their respective supply chains, because these are complex organisms. Let's call a spade a spade. Now, this is the next quantum leap forward.
This has been an exciting hour, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to hear this next quantum leap forward with augmented intelligence. Igor, it is a pleasure. If I had more time, if we had more time, and I hope we do again soon, I would ask what excites you, about what excites you most about the capabilities that are coming unleashed. I also like to ask what do you fear most about this, or should we be scared, and what's scary? But I've learned that what excites is much more interesting and useful. We may not have time for that now, but if you have the time, I would ask you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll tackle both. Look, you should be afraid of AI if you're afraid of your own children, right? So we still have an opportunity to essentially guide these creations into things that represent our values. And I think where we're more afraid is when we see some of these tools in the hands of people that don't reflect our values. That's what it fundamentally, so when you think about great power competition, right? I've done a South by Southwest talk with Lieutenant Colonel Vinben and the like. So when you look at the intersection of AI and how it'd be leveraged by governments, if it's leveraged by liberal democracies and things of that sort, we'll know that eventually, the regulatory environment and the commercial environment and the academic environment will find an equilibrium associated with it that will still preserve our freedoms, our way of life, and the economic mobility that we want for our respective communities. In other places, we're not so sure that freedoms are going to be respected and whether their economies will be developing in a fair way. So that's the fear thing. On the excitement part, look, I was born in Greece, and there was a lagoon, and there would be dolphins coming in, and I that's when the first thought popped in my mind: why can I not talk to you? And so the excitement for me is as we make the world more interactive, and there's new systems coming out, as you heard Tim Cook recently talk about the excitement with augmented reality. The fact that we're going to be able to overlay the world and understand it better. So you literally could be looking at a plant one day and saying, hey, you know, where did you come from? How are you happy? How do you need to be watered? What do you eat? What type of fertilizer is best for you and things of that sort. That's going to create a higher level of understanding in our natural world between us and everything else around us. And frankly, it's going to impart that same level of understanding where 50 years ago, you could have had somebody in the US and you could have had somebody, in Japan, for instance, and they couldn't understand each other because there were very few that spoke both languages. And now machine translation is something that allows us to bridge these cultural divides, a lot more effectively, so that you can have great companies like SAP that are multinationals, where if you look at the population of talent that you have, it's people from all walks of life in all sorts of nation states coming together in all sorts of cultures, and a true melting pot that makes the organization a lot more valuable and can service a lot more individuals. So for me, that's personally exciting, is that when we actually do that and even expand the borders of understanding beyond humankind.
Wow, I hear values and freedom as an increased capability, not just knowledge freedom, but the those opportunities. It was quite fascinating to hear your vision. I think you have a unique view and expertise, and you're standing on a mountain that few of us are on, and through this work. So I really appreciate your perspective and sharing it. And I'm
Thanks for
trying not
having
to
me.
be scared of my kids. Um,
Don't be.
I'm as afraid of them as I should be of there's so many layers there because of their capabilities, especially in a world where there's augmented intelligence for the better.
Absolutely. And look, fortunately or unfortunately, we see different outcomes in children that are, tended to a parent, who's guiding them correctly in terms of the ways of the world, in terms of, enhancing their nature, but also nurturing them, to the highest and best use of their capabilities as well. And that's what we foresee for AI. We're not going to be callous like other folks are. I mean, when they get asked, hey, what is AI going to do? They give flippant answers of, well, there's a 50% chance that we're going to make a lot of money, but there's also a 50% chance that it's going to render humanity extinct. That is not an acceptable answer.
It's
Okay.
not.
You would not accept that as an answer from any of your children. Like, hey, what are you going to do when you grow up? It's like, well, there's a 50% chance that I'm going to kill you, or there's a 50% chance that I'm going to become a trillionaire. That's not acceptable. Okay. And somehow we let a lot of Silicon Valley get away with those flippant remarks instead of turning the flashlight back on them. And there is a way to essentially create these technologies and make them in highly responsible ways. Many of us are enamored with the work that Apple is doing to preserve our privacy with their devices. In the regulatory environment, many of us, appreciate the EU's leadership in drafting, new, potential laws and things of that sort in terms of how AI should affect our lives, both at home and at work as well, right? They have a draft of an AI Act. So people are doing the right thing. There's companies creating responsible AIs that are safeguarding and ensuring that there's not toxic content in there and other types of influences in there that are going to be damaging to our communities. So I think you need to seek them out. You need to seek the policymakers that are going to be defending us. You need to be seeking the companies out that are delivering the proper works that should be supported and should be accelerating through this as well. The academic environments, have a stake in here to make sure that the world is ready for adopting these new tools. This is not, there isn't one mountain that I'm on that the rest of you are not on. We're all equals, but we all have to do our part, as a fabric working together in order to instill the appropriate values, to create the right technologies, to affect outcomes, in our communities. And right now, we're all in the sweet spot of the Goldilocks period of our respective careers, where we all just need to get to work.
I was about to say preach, uh, but I could just say thank you. um, there's a lot of important messages there, and unfortunately, it makes me want to ask you more questions. Um, should we be pausing? I should end. Thank you. It's been a wonderful time. Um, and I really respect your time. There's been a call to take a 6-month pause for all the big companies making AIs, but you covered this just now in terms of we're in this together to give the right inputs to ensure. Um,
Well, thanks for having me, Ben. And was not the first, but it is a series of great conversations we'll continue to have.
Thank you, Igor. It has been a pleasure. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for what you're doing and taking the time to share.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.